Hello gamers, and welcome back to the most mediocre YouTube channel with the most autistic creator, coming at you with a commentary video. Ooh la la, for whom do we owe the pleasure? You can thank Sega in their constant attempts to make me flinch and not invite them to my birthday party. Now Sega has had a rather impressive comeback in recent years with the Yakuza games kicking ass, and Sonic having a pretty good comeback with Frontiers and Shadow Generations. They even greenlit a sequel to Alien Isolation, which was a game a lot of their fans were hoping for. But for every yin, there has to be a yang, and for every white man, there has to be a black man.
What the fuck?
Unfortunately for us, it comes in the form of delisting dozens of classic games on PC. That's right, it's another video of me complaining about game preservation and companies refusing to make their games accessible and affordable for modern audiences. So on the screen right now, I'm going to be scrolling down the list of Sega games that will be disappearing from Steam, and some of these games will also be disappearing from Xbox, with the Sega Genesis Mega Collection disappearing from both PlayStation and Nintendo, and a few select titles possibly disappearing from the Nintendo service. Straight off the bat, this is not good in any way and basically removes most of Sega's classic collections from modern platforms and is just blatantly anti-consumer. Could they release these games in another collection in the future? Perhaps, but we don't know about that. We don't know when these games are going to come back. Plus, while they're gone, we don't really have a replacement. A lot of these games are just going to be gone from modern hardware for a while. Sure, you can emulate, but if people want a actual legal and official way to own these games on modern platforms, they're going to have to buy them up now before they disappear on the 6th. Now, there are a few possibilities for why these games are being taken off the market right now, and none of them are particularly great in my eyes. Firstly, they could be taken off the store so they can re-release them at a higher price in maybe a collection. Think of what Capcom has been doing for the fighting games collection with the recent Marvel vs. Capcom fighting game collection and the SNK fighting game collection. It's a way for Sega to take off the games from Steam, repackage them, and have them in a proper collection. Now, this could be good for us, I don't mind having a physical item for me to have the collection with, but it's also unfortunate for most people because ultimately these games are going to get more expensive, and if people don't want to buy the collection, they have no option to buy each game individually. I mean, look at Steam right now, where basically all of the Mega Drive and Sega Genesis games are $1 a pop, which makes them incredibly affordable and accessible to people who want to play those games. But it also doesn't make Sega too much money. I'd imagine selling each one of these games for $1 a pop, especially games like Shining Force, definitely could be missing some possible revenue. I mean, even Dreamcast games are pretty cheap on the PC, with Space Channel 5 Part 2 and Crazy Taxi and Sonic Adventure 2 being only really like $8 to $10, which is a pretty good deal in my opinion, as most of these games go for way more on the secondhand market. So it makes sense why Sega might want to profit off of their old legacy content by re-releasing it at a higher price. Another commonly cited reason why they might be delist happy is the possibility of remakes and remasters. Remember a few years ago when we saw a sneak peek at the Game Awards at some classic Sega properties that might be getting a remake, like Shinobi, Jet Set Radio, and Crazy Taxi. And what are some of the games that are being delisted? Yeah, get the picture? I just don't understand the mentality that some of these game publishers have, where they release a remake or a remaster and just say, hey, let's remove the pesky original version that no one wants. Why would anyone want to play the original version of these games? The remaster should be a replacement. No, remasters and remakes should never be a replacement for the original. It should be a different flavor. It should be an option for people to have when they want to pick a specific game to play. Just because Jet Set Radio is possibly getting a remake does not mean that I don't want to play the original Jet Set Radio. Thankfully, I already have it on PC and I played it years and years ago. But what if somebody, when the Jet Set Radio remake does come out, wants to play the original? That option will not be available on PC, at least as of right now. Another reason it's dumb is because you're losing the ability to preserve gaming history. I know I go on and on about this in some of my other videos, but preserving gaming history is important because it allows for us to look back at the games that came before and compare them to the games that are coming out now. It allows us to learn from our mistakes and to view at which games are the best possible versions of those games. Not to mention, tons of modern modern remasters or remakes have plenty of issues and changes to the core source material that some people don't want to deal with and would just rather have the original version. Let's just forget about the abomination that was the GTA remasters that butchered the atmosphere, gameplay, and performance of the games, with Rockstar sneakily trying to delist these games around the launch of the remasters. Because why would anyone want to play the originals? Why would we allow the customer to compare and contrast the originals with the remake? We want people to not buy the remake, but if your remake is a good game on its own, it shouldn't matter if people have the option to buy the original. Both of these should be able to exist in the same market. Or how about when Square Enix decided that the original version of Human Revolution was just something we just couldn't handle. We just couldn't handle because the director's cut is there. Why would we want to play the original? Sure, the director's cut has access to the DLC, but some people actually find the DLC to be a little disruptive of the main campaign. And they also removed the piss filter, which is a visual element of the Human Revolution game that a lot of people actually liked about the game. It also made the game run worse and have certain bugs that didn't exist in the original version. The most recent example I can think of is Horizon Zero Dawn, which Sony decided that Horizon Zero Dawn needed a remake for some reason and decided to release the remake by delisting the original. Now the problem with that is the original has tons of mod support, so getting rid of that game from the store and having people not be able to access that game anymore, it just sucks. Yeah, sure, the new one probably is going to be objectively better, but what about all those mods? Do we just have to wait for the mod creators to go back into the remake and basically remake all of those mods? No, we can't expect every single one of them to do that. And they are re-recording some lines and they are making significant changes to the game. Maybe not like earth-shattering changes, but if you don't like those changes that they're making in the remake, then you don't have the option or the opportunity to play it in its original version, which just kind of sucks. I mean, the only way for you to play it really would be to buy a PS4 copy. And even during the creation of this video, I also remembered that you can't play the original version of Sonic Generations. The only way you can get the original copy of Sonic Generations is by buying the Sonic Generations complete pack, which you have to buy a bunch of other Sonic games with that Sonic game to even access it on Steam. And we only got that option because there was significant pushback. Sure, it hasn't completely disappeared, but it's also made it harder and more expensive for people to play the original, which just kind of sucks because the Shadow Generations, even though the new content's really good, I've heard, there's a lot of changes to the original Sonic Generations. Animations, voices, and performances of certain cutscenes that have changed, and people might want to play the original. And now the only way is to buy all the Sonic games in a collection or to get an Xbox 360 or PS3 version of the original game, which just sucks. I don't know, whenever I hear of old games being delisted, it just kind of bums me out and just reminds me about how important it is to make these games accessible. $1 for Shining Force and Phantasy Star should be illegal for how good of a deal it is, but alas, it was never meant to be apparently. Now, this is the obligatory part of the video where I highlight some of the games that would be worth purchasing due to these delistings, maybe highlighting some gems and stuff that you should buy. Because once you buy them, they will stay in your library, and we never know when they're going to actually come back in any official capacity. Man, sometimes I really love video games. All the Phantasy Star games are instant buys for me, as they are some of the deepest and most ambitious JRPGs that Sega has ever made, with 4 being very hard to get your hands on in the physical market and being very expensive, so I'd recommend all the Phantasy Star games. If that Romancing Saga remake earlier this year tickled your fancy, then Phantasy Star is right up your alley. Comic Zone is another really good pick. It's a good beat 'em up that takes place in its comic book as you jump from panel to panel. Music is great, the combat's awesome, and the overall presentation makes it a must play for beat 'em up fans. Even though it can be a bit bullshit here and there, which is pretty typical of games at that time. But thankfully, because it is on Steam, it does have a save state feature, which is an absolute blessing for these types of games. The Toe Jam and Earl games are really trippy action platformers that have some of the most creative visuals of its time. It's really trippy, it has its own unique style, and it's definitely from that time. I love the humor and just the overall vibes of these games. Golden Axe games are really fun beat 'em ups as well, with all 3 games being a lot of fun with friends online. Yeah, it's probably one of the more basic beat 'em ups, but you can't really go wrong with a good solid beat 'em up, especially with some of those character designs. Wow. Nope, not you. The Vector Man 1 and 2 are some of the most underrated games on the Sega Genesis with its pseudo 3D presentation animation that was really impressive at the time. It reminded people a lot about how Donkey Kong Country was impressive at the time with its 3D pre-generated graphics. It was really tough at times too without being Battletoads level of bullcrap. Another good title, Shinobi 3, is one of my favorite action platformers of all time, especially on the Sega Genesis. It has these tight, great controls, great level design, and one of the most satisfying moment-to-moment gameplay of any Sega Genesis title. Once you get into the groove of this title, it just hits that perfect sweet spot for me. Gunstar Heroes is also a great running gun with some really impressive bosses, fun level design, explosions are top-notch with it running really well on PC, along with save states and online co-op. And the online co-op is really fun and makes this such a great game to blast with your friends and hit that new high score. Last games that I want to mention on this list is Shining Force 1 and 2, which are excellent strategy RPGs that have great stories and very addictive gameplay. Shining Force 2 has dozens of party members to collect, with many of them being missable and even having the possibility for multiple different endings depending on your choices in the game. Now, there's definitely tons of games that I did not mention on this list, as there are over 30 different games, and I don't want this to be a whole big thing. I have another project I'm working on at a time, so I just wanted to make this video real quick. Now some of the honorable mentions would obviously be Jet Set Radio, Ristar, Space Harrier, Echo the Dolphin, and Shadow Dancer, but all the games I've mentioned on this list are worth playing and worth buying. I would recommend picking up some of these games, as they have plenty of great quality of life features on Steam, making them probably the best way to play these classic games. In fact, you can buy pretty much all the Sega Mega Drive and Sega Genesis games for around $35, with obviously the Sega Dreamcast games being a little bit more expensive. I would just recommend just picking the games that you actually want to play. You don't have to buy everything. I know that's a thing a lot of people, retro people tell you to do, but just pick what you want to play. Not everything is going to be worth your time. But that's pretty much all I had to say. Obviously, I'm working on a longer form video. This is kind of just something, put in the meantime. I also felt it was important just to update people on this thing, because I know my channel doesn't have a whole lot of reach, but if it can even help one person who didn't know about this, buy Jet Set Radio or buy Nights into Dreams, I think it's worth the effort, definitely. So I appreciate you guys watching the video. Tell me what your favorite, one of these old Sega games are, and I'll see you on the flip side. Keep on playing video games. Bye!